Hmm. Faithfully sharing insights and exploring great books from around the world. Hi there, this is Sally, your book narrator. Today we're diving into The Razor's Edge, a novel by British author W. Somerset Maugham. Maugham was a literary superstar of the 20th century. Born in 1874, he started writing novels and plays in his early 20s. By his late 20s, he was a household name across Europe. As he aged, his influence in America grew even stronger. His classics like The Moon and Sixpence and Of Human Bondage have been adapted into movies and stage plays. They were hugely popular with American readers. Maugham's works are often called novels of manners. They typically delve into the struggles and choices of upper-class Westerners in love, work, and daily life. His stories are rife with snobbishness among the elite. Some characters yearn to break free from this, wrestling with frustration. Meanwhile, the conformist majority stands in stark contrast to these individuals. That's why an authoritative biography of his is titled The Critical Man of the World. It signifies his aloof, critical stance towards humanity. The Razor's Edge, our focus today, was published in 1944 when Maugham was over 70, making it a hallmark of his later career. Unlike his earlier works, often set in France, this is Maugham's first novel with an American protagonist, Larry, who lives in post-WWE America, enjoying prosperity but holding an ideal to seek truth beyond worldly realities, drifting apart from friends. The novel's core is a spiritual quest, and it's one of Maugham's bestsellers. Its first edition sold nearly 400,000 copies. In the book, Maugham appears as a key character himself. He interacts with all the protagonists, chatting, journeying, and sharing his views. Now, let's step into The Razor's Edge and explore Larry's quest for enlightenment. Our hero, Larry Darrell, in part one, decides to leave a secure path behind and head to Paris. This is the starting point of his quest for enlightenment. Though doubts about life's meaning arose in him, and he knew he had to seek answers. What's that all about? Well, Larry lost his parents young and had no other relatives. An old friend of his dad's, a doctor in Marvin, Illinois, took Larry there for school. After graduation, he moved to Chicago, met a wealthy girl, Isabel, and got engaged. Then when the U.S. joined World War I, Larry enlisted in the Air Force, fought in France, and made a close buddy from Ireland. But in a skirmish, his pal got shot saving him, which devastated Larry and left him lost. He couldn't grasp why there's evil and suffering in the world, or what life's purpose really is. After recovering, he returned to Chicago, but skipped college like others because he thought it wouldn't help him find life's meaning. At that time, Europe was declining from the war, while America was booming. Folks felt business opportunities were everywhere. Time to go all in. Thanks to his fiancée, Isabel, Larry joined a circle of business people. A wealthy businessman even offered him a spot, promising riches through stock trading, but Larry politely declined. He didn't fit in with folks who only talked business. I preferred reading and thinking alone. That's Maugham in the novel. That's when he met Larry and his fiancée. Isabel, Maugham noted, and he himself was middle-aged. Seeing these 20-somethings so in love, he felt envious, and quickly noticed Larry was different. Once at a club library, Maugham and Larry bumped into each other, and Maugham found him reading The Principles of Psychology by William James, the American philosopher. Larry told Maugham he felt his knowledge was shallow and needed to read more to make up for it. Through their talk, Maugham sensed Larry's soul was vaguely chasing something, but hadn't found it, making him restless. Yep, Larry was indeed restless. Because he made a big decision, hold off on marriage and business, and head to Paris for 2 years. He told Isabel, I feel I can do more with my life than just sell stocks. Isabel persuaded him, or everyone must work and participate in national affairs. Besides, America is full of promise now. Soon, America will become the world's wealthiest and most powerful nation. Young people should seize such opportunities to earn money and develop themselves. But Larry gently replied, "Well, I'm just not interested in money. What interests me are questions like, what is life really for? Does life have any meaning, or is it all blind fate? A senseless tragedy?" Isabel said, "Darling, don't be foolish. One can't live without money." Isabel had never lacked money, so she didn't understand poverty, but instinctively, she knew money was crucial. When Larry said, "I'd rather be a carpenter or auto mechanic," Isabel immediately retorted, "People would think you're mad." Isabel was distraught, but tried to remain calm. She suggested Larry reconsider. Yet, Larry didn't heed her advice. He soon went to Paris, an unfamiliar place where no one would interfere. Nearly everyone in their circle was baffled and disappointed by Larry's choice. Over a year later, funded by her uncle, Isabel came to France with her mother to meet Larry. Isabel's uncle, a social expert, thought Larry was too proud to work with American nouveau riches, yearning instead for France's truly elegant bourgeoisie. He proposed introducing Larry to Parisian society to build his reputation, but Larry declined this too. Isabel and the others were utterly perplexed. They wondered privately, had something happened to Larry? Had he degenerated? Did he come to Paris just to indulge, mixing with disreputable drifters and living with dissolute women? The more Isabel worried, the more she arranged dinner with Larry and inspected his place. She saw classic philosophy and literature books in Larry's room and learned he was studying Greek with a tutor. Larry told her, "Now my goal's clear. I want to find out if God exists, why there's evil, and whether souls are real. Whether after death the soul endures or everything just ends." Isabel asked Larry, once you gain this wisdom, what do you use it for? Her question reflected a very American mindset. Everything must be useful, or acquiring it is pointless. Mary replied, "If I gain wisdom, I'll naturally know its purpose." When Isabel brought up their engagement, she realized Larry viewed marriage too simplistically. Barry said, "I can live well on 3,000 yearly. We could save for Greece and Italy." But Isabel countered, "I refuse second-class cabins, cheap hotels, public showers, diners, or befriending paupers." She grew more dismayed seeing Larry had no concept of child-rearing costs. "A woman's youth is fleeting," she warned. "By 30, we age. Without security, survival is impossible." Larry, ignoring practicalities, urged her to embrace spiritual joy like him. "In Paris," he said, "meeting diverse people daily immerses you in infinite wisdom." He believed true fulfillment came only from spiritual richness. Their worlds clashed until Isabel couldn't bear it. She removed her ruby engagement ring, ending their promise. "If you loved me," she declared, "you wouldn't make me this miserable." Mary answered, "I do love you, but following one's convictions inevitably hurts others." Tormented, Isabel confided in her nanny, "I deeply love Larry while leaving." On his last night, she even considered trapping him with pregnancy to force a conventional Chicago life. But she abandoned the plan last minute, deeming it too vile. "I don't know who's more selfish," as she admitted, "him denying my life or me demanding it. Perhaps it's her relentless pursuit of wealth that's more selfish." The worldly wise nanny comforted her. "You weren't wrong to leave Larry, nor was he wrong to walk his chosen hard path." The novel's second part covers Larry's next decade, an advanced stage of his spiritual quest. He transitioned from casual wandering to true vagrancy and asceticism. After parting with Isabel, Larry vanished until Maugham finally met him and heard his travels beyond France through Europe to enrich his experiences. He didn't just socialize with all sorts for idle joy, but took up humble manual labor. Larry worked in a coal mine, befriending Polish workers. One burly man challenged him to feats of strength and card tricks. Though foul-mouthed, when drunk, the worker would discuss mysticism with Larry, questioning God's existence. Manual labor brought no wealth, but sharpened Larry's observational skills. At the mine, come spring, He'd gaze for hours at a flower pot on a tenement sill or young trees shrouded in dawn mist. Later, his Polish friend guided him through Belgium, teaching German en route. They landed work on a German farm. Larry studied each family member's quirks. Restless, he left his companion at midnight, wandering while watching night fade to dawn and sunlight slowly reveal the landscape. Larry treasured these experiences, recounting them passionately. But when the nanny asked what he'd gained, Larry fell silent. Maugham realized Larry saw life not lived for tangible gains, but lived. His pursuit was inseparable from the journey itself, like art for art's sake, indifferent to fame or fortune. Kern. By now, Isabel's life had become utterly conventional. Her gains were tangible. She had a family, 2 children, and a stable social circle. Her husband Gray had amassed a fortune at a young age. But in 1929, the Great Depression hit America, and Gray went bankrupt. Fortunately, Isabel had family assets and her uncle's help, so she and Gray returned to Paris and met Larry again. It was a reunion after a full decade. By then, Larry had traveled through France, Germany, Italy, Spain, and spent 5 years in India, having set off from Seville, Spain. At the time, he believed his journey in the West was complete and should continue learning in the East. So, there he studied under a yoga master, becoming a full-fledged ascetic seeker. Upon returning to Paris and meeting Isabel and Gray, their conversation instantly revealed the gap between a spiritual seeker and worldly people. Upon hearing about India, Gray immediately asked about popular myths of Indian miracles. She asked, "Is it true that Indian magicians can make a rope stand upright and have a child climb it? And do yogis really have magical powers?" To this, Larry simply replied, "I'm not sure. I just know that wise people in India don't take such miracles seriously." He mentioned a legend of a yogi walking on water, and Gray asked, "Is that really possible?" Gray said, "Truth or falsehood doesn't matter." Throughout the talk, Isabel and Gray kept asking how divine the yogis were, while Larry always spoke of his own practices, yoga, and language learning experiences. He described his small hut in the jungle, the countryside he visited, the wildlife there, and how he loved recounting the tranquility and bliss of breathing in the tuberose-scented air as the yogi taught. Later, Gray mentioned his headaches, and Larry cured him using yoga therapy. Gray was astonished, but Larry remained nonchalant. "I deserve no credit," he said. "Most of your cure came from your own strength." Next, the novel reflects Larry's continued ascent on his ascetic path through 2 events in his love life and marital choices. First is the story with his mistress, Suzanne. In the decade after breaking up with Isabel, Larry lived with Suzanne, a nearly 40-year-old single Frenchwoman. She had a daughter and had been close with several painters, loving the artist's lifestyle. While living with them, she modeled and kept house. After meeting her, Larry took her to a small town where they stayed a while. Larry often read to Suzanne and took her to an Air Force cemetery, sharing how his friends saved him during the war. That experience started his spiritual quest. But Suzanne couldn't grasp why Larry told her these things. One day, Larry bid farewell, gave her 12,000 francs, and left. Suzanne later told Maugham, "Larry's the strangest man I've met, wants nothing, no marriage, no money, no occupation." Maugham said, "He's the only person I know who acts purely for the sake of action itself." Suzanne didn't understand that at all. The second story concerns a friend named Sophie. A decade later, Isabel and Gray returned to Paris and reunited with Larry. They found Larry had become a full ascetic after his Indian spiritual practice. One day, they encountered Sophie. Isabel knew her and recounted her life to the others, like who she married, what son she had, how her husband and son died in a crash, how Sophie drank daily, turned to prostitution, lived off insurance, etc. All trivial gossip. Yet, Larry knew Sophie too. She was his childhood friend. In an elegant, gentle tone, Mary recalled, At 14, Sophie loved poetry, cared about social justice, an idealist dreaming of public service. Isabel flushed with shame, feeling Larry used Sophie to subtly mock her own vulgarity. Maugham noticed Isabel's reaction once while out with Isabel, Gray, and Larry. On their return, Maugham saw Isabel staring intensely at Larry's arm, her face flashing with hungry longing. Maugham said, "This is animal lust, not humanity." That face reminded him of a bitch in heat. This detail not only shows Isabel's jealousy, but also reflects how the gap between her and Larry has widened over 10 years. So they're now from two different worlds. She can't enter Larry's spiritual realm as a seeker and can only focus on his physical being with animal instinct. What happened next was a reversal. One day, Isabel suddenly learned that Larry decided to marry Sophie, and she flew into a rage. She hissed, "Sophie is a slut with innate depravity, only seeking thrills in life. How could you marry her?" Although Larry was no longer her fiancé, her pride was severely wounded by his choice. So Isabel secretly schemed. She pretended to enthusiastically help Sophie prepare for the wedding, but deliberately placed a bottle of sweet wine to tempt her. For Larry, Sophie had quit drinking and smoking for 3 months, giving up all bad habits. But Isabel's insidious temptation finally overwhelmed Sophie. She got dead drunk, laughing heartily as if she hadn't relaxed in ages. Sophie seemed to see her fallen past again. With an emotional breakdown, she left alone without a word, and the marriage plans came to nothing. Although Isabel successfully prevented Larry and Sophie's marriage, she was still very confused. She went to Maugham and asked, "Since Larry broke up with me long ago, became an ascetic, and decided to remain celibate, why would he consider marrying a woman like Sophie, who's disreputable? What kind of mindset is this?" Maugham told her, "This shows Larry's asceticism has reached a high level. Precisely because he knows Sophie is a slut, he wants to save her by marrying her. This is a form of self-sacrifice." Mary has always pondered why misfortune exists in the world, and now he truly wants to save an unfortunate person through action. Maugham said, "Self-sacrifice is an overwhelming emotion. Even lust and hunger pale in comparison. It makes one hold their character in highest esteem and drives them to destruction. When one sacrifices themselves, in that moment they become greater than God, because God could only sacrifice his only son." Although Maugham understood Larry well, he didn't mock Isabel's lowly state or her staring like a beast in heat. He said, "Larry may have a high level, but he's indeed doing something hopeless. He has the courage to sacrifice himself, but lacks risk assessment and calculation. So he'll suffer plenty." Oh, in the last part of the story, Larry decides to return to America. Is he ending his quest? No, when he announced this to Maugham, he stated his life principles: be patient, be affable, be compassionate, discard the ego, and avoid women. He said he'll not only continue self-improvement, but also try to influence American society with what he's learned. Maugham reminded him that living as an ascetic in India would be fine, but in America, you'd likely be arrested as a vagrant soon. Larry said he decided to become an auto mechanic as his profession, because I like manual labor. Larry also said he'd live in New York, buy a car, and be his own driver. Maugham said, "Owning a taxi makes you a capitalist." Larry replied, "My taxi is just a tool of labor, like a mendicant monk's staff and bowl." He'll not only continue his quest, but also realize the truth. To live a truly noble spiritual life, one shouldn't isolate in mountains, but return to society. This is like the Chinese saying, great seclusion in the city, maintaining transcendence within the mundane, and keeping the soul pure amid filth. Exploring truth through the simplest labor is a high level of enlightenment. Moreover, Larry plans to dispose of all personal property. Maugham warned him to think twice, as money brings the world's most precious things. Rich people don't need favors, They can tell anyone to get lost if they want. But Larry had mentally prepared himself for everything. He said, money means freedom to you. To me, it means bondage. Before Larry decided to return to America, Isabel and Gray had already gone back. When Isabel learned from Maugham that Larry was returning, Isabel was overjoyed, thinking she could have Larry again. Maugham calmly told Isabel, Larry's a seeker. Even if he's near you, he's in another world. His America is as distant from yours as the Gobi Desert. After hearing this, Isabel said dejectedly, now I've truly lost him. The main story ends here. Isabel continued her life as a socialite. Her husband Gray loved her as always, and he had stable work. As for the two women closely connected to Larry, Suzanne and Sophie, their endings were completely different. Suzanne married a provincial French manufacturer, securing her life, while Sophie died in a murder. Even so, Maugham said each of them got what they wanted. Some gained spiritual freedom, others material security. Some found life, others found release. The Razor's Edge concludes, the novel was hugely popular in America. The path to transcendence, revealed in the book, opened a door for American readers. Later in the 1960s and 70s, American youth embraced reclusive lifestyles, many embarking on Eastern quests, like the protagonist, directly influenced by the Razor's Edge. And the title comes from the Upanishads. The sharp edge of a razor is difficult to pass over. Thus the wise say the path to salvation is hard. Meaning, a razor's edge is extremely sharp. Crossing from one side to the other is arduous. Thus the wise say those who attain salvation are exceedingly rare. In the story, Larry embodies Maugham's ideal, one who crossed that razor's edge. For inner peace and life's meaning, Larry abandoned secular life, material needs, and psychological comforts, sacrificing everything. He remained single, no family, no career, no steady income, finally relinquishing all possessions. Few achieved this, but Larry did. He was a rare soul saved from a materialistic world. He crossed that sharp blade. In the novel, seeking life's meaning and God's existence, Larry left America for Europe, mingling with all walks of life, learning languages, traveling, working, and adventuring as fate allowed. Later, he went to India to study Indian philosophy and yoga, became an ascetic, then returned to Europe, and finally America. In Maugham's view, the quest itself was the answer to these questions. In Paris, the character Maugham had a long talk with Larry, who shared his understanding of Hindu philosophy. Larry said Hinduism's greatest insight is that the universe has no beginning or end. It eternally cycles from growth to balance, from balance to decline, decline to dissolution, dissolution to growth, an endless loop. This realization didn't come from lectures or gurus, but from his wandering experiences that allowed deep understanding. Thus, spiritual seeking must be a journey requiring long-term immersion. In the novel, Larry's acquaintances never grasped his thinking. Isabel and others were his opposites. They sought stability while Larry remained nomadic. They focused on acquisition. Larry valued experience. They had rigid life expectations, feeling old at 30, while Larry learned agelessly. Their fixed views provided security. Larry believed people could change through learning, like he did. Larry is portrayed as free-spirited yet disciplined, principled yet self-reflective. She knew spiritual seeking couldn't be demanded of others. When last meeting Maugham, Larry admitted understanding Isabel. He recalled telling her, "Come idle in Paris with me and be forever happy." Later, he realized how inappropriate that was. No wonder Isabel felt disappointed. She was too young, too life-loving, he said. I could follow my path, but couldn't ask her to join me. Maugham, as a novelist and social observer, acknowledged gender differences. Women naturally value stability, while men enjoy more freedom. In the story, Isabel, Gray, their relatives, all chose conventional lives, the more expected path. Especially Isabel. Though she selfishly blocked Larry and Sophie's marriage, Maugham didn't condemn her for it. In fact, whether married or not, Larry and Sophie walked parallel paths with little intersection. Sophie ultimately had to face her own trials to complete her journey. Maugham's role was simply to present these different lives and choices. By inserting himself into the novel as narrator, Maugham framed the story as a personal life experience. Thus, through the novel, we glimpse Maugham's true thoughts and mindset in his 70s. The sharp edge of a razor is difficult to pass over. Thus, the wise say the path to salvation is hard. These 16 words were actually Maugham's personal creed. Even in his early 20s, Maugham pondered ultimate questions. After becoming a best-selling author, he realized worldly success couldn't bring happiness. And his mind found no peace. His desires were endless. He retreated to cleanse himself, yet readers still sought life advice. Prominent figures invited him to glittering events. So he wrote The Razor's Edge, using Eastern wisdom and Larry's journey to show readers crossing the blade is arduous, requiring asceticism and facing misunderstanding. Its joys are solitary, but without daring the razor's edge, you'll never see life's other side. All right, that concludes our exploration of Maugham's The Razor's Edge. Key insights are here.